Hello and welcome along or welcome back to the Dads in Business video podcast series. My name is Rob Taylor from Dads in Business, where we aim to help busy working dads bring the best of themselves to work and to home. And as part of our work in doing that, we try and speak to experts in the field, others that are making noises in the space, and those who can generally help us in our mission to be the best we can be. And I'm delighted today to be joined by a very special guest, Lorde Laurentiis. I have to have two goes at that. I imagine you'll correct me if I do get that wrong. Lorde, thank you for joining us. Please do introduce yourself properly.
Okay.
Tell us who you are and where do you come from?
Yeah, okay, cool. Right, it's Laurentiis. It's Italian, but yeah, that's it always trips people up, so I have to spell it, you know, every time I go anywhere. So where am I from? I'm originally from Bristol, so here in the UK, born and raised there, currently living down in Devon. I've moved around quite a lot. I am married to an American woman, Sarah. She's been in the country for about just over 20 years now. And she's also our creative director. So we live together, we work together. And yeah, that's interesting at times for sure. And yeah, and I head up Mandad Media Limited.
So tell us about firstly, how's working with the wife? I always say I'd never work with my missus. I think it'd be destined for failure if we did that. But tell us about Mandad Media. What's that? What's the purpose and mission that you've set out with Mandad?
Sure. Okay. I guess if I go back to the beginning then really and talk about, you know, how it came to be. So my wife was pregnant with our second. We were at home and at the time living out in the middle of nowhere. Pandemic had hit. We decided to basically hunker down with another family member and his two children, as a single dad, two young kids. So there was a few of us in the house, but we thought, great, we're going to be safe, you know, out in the countryside, all good stuff. It started with a conversation basically over a drink or two, and we were talking to this family member about his challenges as a young dad, particularly, but as a single dad, and how the things that he was coming up against, even things like, you know, talking to the GP about, you know, things, you know, to do with his young kids and his daughter specifically. So we got to chatting about what is out there for men. Where do dads go to for advice? Where do they turn for, you know, questions, you know, that might relate to female issues, as it were, especially, you know, for us guys raising girls. I've got two at home, you know, so we had a look around, and yes, there were some Facebook groups and a few bits going on, but we couldn't really find what we were looking for. And we had a chat about plugging the gap, really. And the conversation just evolved. And it eventually came to the point, well, we don't just want to create another Facebook group. Let's do something. Let's create something that's going to be impactful, that will help other dads, will connect other dads, and will serve as some information sharing, as an educational position. And the idea of a magazine was born. The name of the company itself was relatively straightforward to come up with. You know, you're a man, then you become a dad. We just put the two together, and then this had all kind of evolved over a late evening, shall we say, with a couple of beers in hand. And the following morning, we run the idea past my wife, and she's very creative, very technically minded. Digital art, graphic design, that kind of thing. So before you know it, we had a logo, and it just kind of went from there, really. More and more ideas, and you know, she was able to throw up a simple website, and we just got the ball rolling from there, really. So it was born, I guess, out of almost a necessity, but you know, with the idea that we would be able to help and serve other men and other dads where perhaps other services weren't. And there is not another monthly publication for dads out there in the UK. So we feel that we're sort of plugging a gap in the market, really.
Yeah, brilliant. And thanks for that sort of background. It's really fascinating to hear. I think sometimes the best ideas come from those late nights, don't they?
Yeah.
When you're most relaxed, and then you're lucky that your partner's a graphic creative designer, and bang, there you go, you're in business. I love that. I was just listening to the introduction there, and there was a couple of things I want to pick up on. Am I right in thinking you had your second during lockdown?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and how was that as an experience? Did you find it quite challenging?
Yes and no. The birth of our second child, which I'm more than happy to tell you about, was interesting. But in terms of being locked down, now we were quite happy, to be honest with you. We were out there in the middle of nowhere. We'd planned a home birth, you know, we'd already done it once before. Everything was going fine. There were no complications. We'd bought everything that we needed. You know, we had midwives on standby, you know, hopefully to get to us in time. You know, and we were quite against going into hospital if we could help it because of COVID and everything. You know, nobody really knew too much about it. You know, we're talking end of May, beginning of June time, 2020, and nobody really knew what it was still. You know, we'd seen China, we'd seen Italy, you know, all of that going on, and we thought, right, well, it's going to hit us hard at some point, so let's try and stay out of the medical facilities and try and stay out of everywhere, to be honest with you. So it was all going great until Sarah got sick, and she didn't know what was wrong, but she knew something was really wrong. And she had phoned the triage department on the labour ward and explained sort of how she was feeling, described her symptoms and stuff. But she was told that, you know, it doesn't really sound like there's anything going on. If you're still concerned, phone us in a few hours. So we did that. And the second phone call went along the similar sort of lines. And she was told, well, if you really are, like, it doesn't sound like anything's going on, but if you are really concerned, then phone your GP. And essentially, it's not our problem. Now we were sort of really quite on the line in terms of next to our due date, and you know, Sarah had sort of some dull lower back pain, and we thought, okay, well, early labour. We get to the GP, and you know, she's asked for a sample, and then things sort of go on with the GP. Sarah goes into labour while she's in the doctor's office, and because of her symptoms and how she's presenting, we are straight to hospital at that point. I throw my eldest out, you know, at a friend's house on the way. We get to hospital, and we're there then overnight. And baby is, you know, up and down, heart rate everywhere. Turns out Sarah had an infection that we didn't know about, which had developed into sepsis. So by the time we'd got to hospital, Sarah's organs were already failing, and things were, you know, really quite critical during that overnight period. And we ended up with an emergency C-section the following morning. So yeah, it was all a bit crazy. And I think I've heard a lot of stories from other dads about, you know, only being allowed in for 30 minutes while their partner gives birth, and then they're kicked back out into the car park, you know, and all sorts of horrendous things during lockdown. And I guess in a way we're quite fortunate that she was so sick that I was able to stay all night through the operation and through recovery.
Wow, goodness me, I didn't know that was how that story was going to unfold. But I mean, God willing, everything's okay now and everyone's healthy. And
yeah, well, yes and no. I guess you know, it took us a while to stabilize the baby, stabilize Sarah. You know, I was there during the C-section, and as soon as they pulled the baby out, Sarah went into shock. So her, you know, she was literally shaking on the table. You know, there were conversations about washing her blood and all sorts. You know, it was there's a lot going on at the time, but thankfully everyone is all good now. But it so transpires, and we didn't realize at the time, I didn't think anything of it for a long time, but our youngest, who is very nearly 2, she's 2 on Monday, and she is showing all the signs and symptoms of being autistic. And having done lots of research and reading around the topic, because I was thinking, how is this possible? How is this the case? I don't quite understand how this has sort of come to be. And it transpires that, having read there's a huge medical study, nearly 2 million sets of data that they looked at, and there is a significant correlation between mothers who have infections during pregnancy and then a child having autism. Something like there's a 78% more likelihood of you having an autistic child if there's an infection. So it could be anything from a UTI all the way to sepsis. And my belief at this point in time is that's what's happened. Is that this infection was building and building and building to the point at which it got critical, but that had an impact on our unborn baby. So we're now kind of navigating the whole SEND, type situation, really.
Well, at least you've, if it is the case that it's your daughter, isn't it? Daughter.
Yeah.
Is autistic. The fact you can pick that up early is probably a good thing. I know people that have kids with similar situations, and it went so unchecked for so long. Whereas now, if we're at a point where we can identify that at such an early age, that's great for everyone, isn't it? Most importantly, your daughter, but also for you as a dad, how to know how to deal with that, I guess, because it must be challenging for you. Yeah,
for sure. And it's interesting. We very, very early on, we not joked about the fact that she might be autistic, but it was a sort of an off the cuff comment that, as a brand new baby, you couldn't even cough in the same room without waking her up. Now normally you can hoover around the, you could go around your, about your business, and, my biggest one, sleeps like the dead. So we kind of made that comment really early on, and we thought, it could be, and then we just put it to one side. And everything was great. She was hitting all her milestones, rolling over, sitting up, all of that kind of stuff. It was all great. And I suppose until she got to about 12 months, and then things just seemed to kind of stop and didn't progress as they should have. And so, yeah, as parents, we've been able to pick up on, a lot of her behaviors and done our research and looking at the signs and symptoms and stuff. And now we've had an initial appointment with a health visitor who's done they do a check sheet and they score everything. So the initial sort of thought is that yeah, she is autistic. She's got about 5 words, and she's almost 2, whereas the big one, who's now 8.5, you could have a full conversation with her at that point. And she hasn't stopped talking since. So yeah, it's just interesting to see the difference, really. But we will do whatever we need to do, and just to support her and whatever she needs, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that so openly. I appreciate that. That wasn't on the agenda before we started. So thank you for sharing. And I guess to go back to your project with the Mandad Media there, it's what a great community you're building to get the support that you might otherwise not get. And I guess an obvious sort of question around your experiences, not only from your wife being very poorly and the obvious threats and fears there, but now your daughter might be autistic and you're going to have to grow up and learn how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Did you get support that you needed at that point as a man and a dad? And are you now, or have you noticed that there are some gaps, both in the sort of pre-birth time through to where you are now?
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's part of what we're trying to tackle with Mandad Media is there isn't enough support for dads, for sure. We're at a point where more men are talking about you know, mental health, postnatal depression, that kind of thing. But we've still got so far to go, I think. And my experience is that, you know, I attended every appointment with my wife. We're very much 50-50. You know, it's very much, we share everything. We're both very involved. And I did 50% of the appointments afterwards. So as an example, we had feeding issues, we had latching issues, we had weight loss. You know, getting through the birth was one thing, but we had quite a few issues thereafter as well. So we'd have to go to weigh the baby every 2 days. We were up literally around the clock every 2 hours. She had to be fed because she just wasn't. You know, she was losing weight. So for several weeks, we were up every 2 hours, and it was exhausting. But you know, I would take her to be weighed, and I think that kind of that element of surprise from health professionals is, you know, to say, oh, dad's here. Why is dad here? Where's mum? You know, and it's frustrating. It's really annoying actually, because dads are, and I've read the book by Dr. Anna Machin, you know, all about dads and fatherhood and the evolution of fatherhood. And we are as biologically primed to care for children as women are, yet the medical profession and even the education system doesn't seem to want to recognize that. So for instance, when I turned up at my youngest's 12-month development check, because of COVID, only one of us was allowed in. It was my turn to go in. So we said, right, okay, well, Sarah's going to go and sit in the van and I'm going to take the baby in. And this look of complete shock almost on the health visitor's face. And I just think, why? You know, why should that be the case? Why can dad not take baby in to do whatever is required from a health or medical point of view? There wasn't a single question I couldn't answer. There wasn't a thing I didn't know about either my wife or my child. And I think it's a real shame. I think a lot of guys are worried about sort of stepping up or into that sort of role, if you will. You know, as you'll know, typically a lot of guys go back to work and it's mum who stays at home looking after the baby. You know, so we've got a massive kind of shift, I think, that needs to happen, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. And there are things that are happening. But there was, going back to your sort of initial question, yeah, there was no support. There was no, how are you doing? There was no, here's someone to talk to. Here's a support service. Here's some counselling. Here, what, you know, whatever. Have you got any questions? Now, we were offered a medical debrief, which, to be fair, we never took up. We were far too busy trying to keep the baby alive and just recovering from a C-section and all of that kind of stuff, that it just fell by the wayside. And we just felt in the end, do you know what, actually, let's just not re-traumatize anybody. You know, it's happened, we're moving on. But still, there was no follow-up, you know, and I think that's really important, to not only address dads in the room during your booking appointment, during your follow-up consultations and scans, you know, and then the appointments that come after, you know, health visiting, weighing, that kind of stuff. It's all very mum focused. And I get that she's the one carrying, she's the one delivering, but dads are so important, so essential to a happy, healthy family life, and they're just not addressed properly.
No, I agree. I think it's interesting to see that your birth of your second during lockdown wasn't actually that different to the arrival of my first back in 2014. He arrived late-ish in the day. It was quite, you know, it's the first one, never been through this before. You know, looking back, I probably hadn't prepared very well, and I didn't know what to do. It's like, what am I supposed to do? It's all about the wife. It was quite a laborious process. And then as soon as we dropped the missus with my little one up to the ward, it was like 9 o'clock at night. It's like, right, off you go. You're not allowed. You need to get out. Off you go. So it's like, well, where's my bonding opportunity at that point? It's almost taken away from you, because right there and then you're made to feel like a spare part. Like, you're not welcome now. Off you go. You can come back between 9 and 5.
Yeah.
And that was it. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I've just been through, like you say, we always have to preface this with, of course, it's more important that the woman who's been carrying this child is looked after. It goes without, it should go without having to say it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't diminish the importance of checking in. You know, no one checked in and said, how are you? Are you all right? Do you know what you're doing now? It's like, not a clue.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home and I was in a daze. It's like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And you're right. You know, 2 weeks after that, I went back to work because I was employed at the time, not working for myself. And I've said this on many of the previous chats. It was as if I'd had a holiday. Like, oh, you're back. How was your break? How was your break?
yeah. Exhausting.
Yeah. But you have to almost like present yourself in a way of, yeah, absolutely fine, not a problem. Because you can't show that weakness, or you can't show that exhaustion or vulnerability, because you're back at work now and you best be at work and not away, mentally away somewhere else. So it's interesting the correlation that even during COVID, compared to mine that wasn't during a global pandemic, there were correlations there. And I guess, Lord, what you might see, it'd be interesting your thoughts on this. Has COVID, do you think, sent us back to, in any progress that had been made? You know, both people can come along to appointments. Will the dad be coming? Whereas now it's only one can come. It'll be the mom. Have you seen sort of a regression in that respect?
I think so. I think that basically where only one can come, dad becomes disposable. You know, he like you say, a spare part. And there's a dad story, interestingly, in issue 11, which has just been released. There's a dad who describes a really difficult situation. They have one child. They've had a few miscarriages, and he describes one appointment that he went into where the consultant came in. This was in the States, but regardless, the consultant came in, almost kind of walked in, turned his back on dad, addressed the mother. You know, there was a conversation had, and then he left the room. And yes, it's her body, but it's their child. And I think whether it's a miscarriage, a stillbirth, you know, a live birth, or, you know, a child goes into NICU, or even if there are no complications at all, dad is 50% of this situation for the most part. You know, dads typically, I'd like to think that, you know, they're decent guys. They want to be there. They want to be involved. They're hands-on, you know, and we should be encouraging them as much as possible. Whereas, yeah, I do think COVID has basically said, well, dads don't really matter. Out you go, mate. The car park's over there. Or there's a vending machine down the corridor. And I think it's a massive shame. And I think we've got a lot of work to do now to kind of come back, claw that back really, and come back to where we were, but even then move things on even more. Because as I said earlier, you know, dad's mental and physical health and well-being is 50% of this family dynamic. And it massively impacts. And, you know, whether dad's stressed or he's got mental health issues, or, you know, there's a problem within the couple, you know, within their relationship, whatever it might be, these things need to be looked at collectively. You know, it's not just a mum problem, it's a partnership problem or a family problem.
No, I agree, and it's interesting. It brings me back some memories of other conversations that we've had with others where they are the primary caregiver. There's one chap called Michael Ray. He's an Australian, he's solo dad. And he's flushing out so many stigmas that still happen. And it's not just in the process of having the kid, it's in society as a whole.
Mm.
You know, he was told he couldn't turn up to his daughter's ballet recital. He couldn't go backstage because it was child protection. Because only moms were allowed backstage. And it's just, if we want to go, you know, my area, if there is an area of specialism for me in this space, it's not that equality. So I'm married. I'm not the primary caregiver in that respect. But surely my observation would be, if we're striving for equality for women, as we should in the workplace, equal pay, we can't have that without looking after the dads as well.
Yeah.
Because until we motivate and inspire the dads to want to engage at that level, and it's not shamed or embarrassing or guilt-ridden, we're not going to have true equality, are we?
No, definitely. And I think, you know, I know Michael, and I know a few other guys that are really trying to move and shake things within that field. You know, there are companies out there, you know, John Lewis is an example where they've got, you know, an enhanced parental leave package for dads, and encouraging guys to take it up. And, you know, we would do so much more for women when we level the playing field for guys, and for men, like you say, to feel that they can, firstly, that they can take that time off, making it available to them through their employer, you know, and you know, it goes up to government policy and that kind of thing. Like, things need to be in place for that to happen, and encouraging it across society, you know, across industries, in families, and women will see more and more equality when we do more for men. We give them that time. We encourage them to take that time. As you mentioned very early on, that bonding, you know, time that was snatched away from you because you were kicked out at 9 o'clock in the evening or whatever it was. So dads need to connect with their babies. That, you know, we hear so many stories from dads who feel that they're not bonding, they're not connecting, like, you know, the baby hates them even, and every time the baby comes to them, it cries and they give it back to mum, you know, and it creates further problems, even to the point of resentment sometimes. And that just goes on and on. You know, I could talk all day about sort of family dynamic and, you know, the potential for issues and even leading to separation. You know, we've got to get it right from the beginning. Dads going to appointments, being allowed the time off work to, you know, show up to scans and whatever it might be. And I do think that we need to treat situations on a case-by-case basis. Yes, there needs to be like a standard paternity leave package, but then what happens if your child is sick and is in the NICU for weeks, if not months on end? You know, how do we support dads then? Yeah, there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot, I think, for employers to think about, and some are getting there, but I think it is going to take us years.
Well, I can sense it's something you're very passionate about, and like you say, you can really squirrel down into this, and you know, please do carry on the fight on that, because I can sense it's very personal and important to you as well. And I guess as part of that work is the magazine, is the Man Dad project, and I think a lot of what you're talking around does tie into perceptions and stigmas. And I know you've been doing a lot of work around, you've mentioned one around the dad stories. I'd be interested to sort of share your findings around what are dads telling you in 2022? What's happening now? How do you think that's changed?
Sure.
What perceptions are we feeling out there from your community? Sure.
I think that a lot of dads, a lot of men, let's start with men in general, you know, there's a good, I would say, percentage of guys who don't quite understand where they fit, where they should be, what they should be doing. You know, we've had things where guys have said, for example, I don't feel like I can go and talk to a girl in a bar anymore because I might get accused of something. I don't know if I should behave a certain way. I don't know how I should be anymore. So I think we've got, you know, things like toxic masculinity being kind of floated around, and you know, there are some guys that are almost apologetic for being male, and it's a massive shame. And I feel almost as if we're being pitted against each other, men and women, you know, and you've got, you know, from the sort of feminist side saying one thing, and then guys not really understanding what they should be doing, and it feels really complicated, and like there's a lot of confusion, you know, and it's a really weird time to be honest, having especially gone through this pandemic, and people are just sort of trying to find their feet again and going back to work and all of that kind of stuff. And we've got guys who then moving into fatherhood, where they're saying things like, well, when my wife is breastfeeding, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I don't feel like I have a role, or how can I support her? And in terms of, you know, from an educational point of view, we want to be helping dads understand where they do have a place, where they do have a role, and to help them understand what they should or can be doing. Going back to our situation a couple of years ago, you know, my wife had a C-section, so every time we were up for a feed, it would be on me to do the nappy change. I'd hand them, you know, I'd get the baby up, I would do the nappy change, I'd hand her over, she'd have a breastfeed, I'd then take the baby and do the winding and the burping and stuff, and then put the baby back down. So it was, you know, there was very much a process to it. We had it all worked out, and I did as much as I could to support my wife, who just was recovering from sepsis now, the major operation. You know, food and snacks and housework, and you know, and sorting the other kid out. Like, there is plenty for dads to be doing in supporting that. And yes, whilst the baby is actually feeding, there's a million and one things you can be doing. But it's, I think a lot of guys not really understanding that, and I think we've got to do more to support dads in that role. And then as things progress, so you know, we're hearing, you know, sort of murmurings, I suppose, about not knowing what to do for the best, you know. And then there's over, I don't know, the last couple of decades or more, we're seeing a shift in dads being more hands-on, really wanting to be involved, really wanting to understand what's going on with their babies and their children, feeling like they have now a conflict between, well, I really want to be at home with my kids, but I've got to go out to work. I really want to be involved and, for example, see the health visitor, but I can't get the time off. And then there's this massive conflict between not being at home enough, not being home to support their partner, to support their child or their other children, and performing at work. You know, like you said earlier, when I'm being at work, you're expected to be at work. But baby brain happens to guys as well. You know, I have walked around, I've gone into the room not even knowing what I've gone in there for. I've gone upstairs forgetting what was in my head. I've got to come all the way back down again. There have been times when I've been trying to work and just mush, complete mush, you know, can't focus, can't concentrate, you know, because there is so much going on. So I think we also need to take things like that into account. Dad wants to be there for both. He wants to be there to support his family. He also wants to show up at work. And I feel like there is that element of guilt, and there's that element of wanting to perform really well in both aspects of his life. But it's tough, and we don't. I'm lucky I work for myself, same as you now. But in terms of, you know, employers, we don't get enough, I think, support and recognition as in terms of our role as dads. It's, you know, there's been a lot about maternity leave, maternity pay, etc. But actually, we need to be doing more for dads.
No, yeah, there's a lot to unpack from your comments there. It's really refreshing to hear your thoughts around what it is to be a man these days. You can't say anything Yeah, as a species, we seem to be getting shot down before we've even said anything, don't we? It is challenging, and you wonder what that is doing to, the next generation that are going to be parents. What is it doing to them if they don't know? Yeah. I just scribbled it down here. It's almost like they don't know themselves before they become parents. So how on earth are they supposed to know what they're supposed to do?
Yeah.
When they have got a kid, when they don't know themselves very well.
Yeah. And and I think, and we do, we're criticized a lot from the way we put a nappy on. We're not doing it right, we're not getting it right. And then when we do try, it's, we get comments like, oh, so you're babysitting today then? Or, oh, good for you, you've got the kids today. Well, actually, I've got my kids every day. For me personally, I do a significant amount of housework. I prep the baby's food. I organize and manage, the house basically. And I think that there's a lot of work. We talk about unpaid care, domestic work, but actually I think there's a lot of guys out there doing also an awful lot of that, but they don't talk about it. How much washing and ironing do I do? A lot. How many guys actually talk about the fact that they do those things?
It shouldn't be scored, should it? This is the problem. You shouldn't have to say that. You shouldn't have to say, I do 3 loads of washing every week. I cooked 5 meals this week. It shouldn't be a look at me scoring these points. It should just be, I just do it because that's my role.
And because it needs doing. And my wife and I both work full time, so we've got to divvy stuff up. And I think that every dynamic is going to be different, whether mum stays at home or she's on maternity leave, or somebody works part-time. That will then perhaps have an impact on who does what around the house. But I think that a lot of guys don't talk up, don't speak up, about what they do actually do enough. And as you were saying just now about the impact on younger men and boys, and the next generation to come along, there's an element of young boys and teenagers and young men, again, not really understanding what is expected of them. How should they behave? How should they be? Learning to get in touch with who it is that they feel that they are. Is it toxic to be masculine? But what is masculinity actually? What does it mean to you as a person? What does it mean to society? Is it all about being really macho and having big muscles and having, a big job and a fancy car on the driveway? Or is it about being strong and flexible and showing up for your partner and your kids, and, and striving to be the best parent you can be? There will be a lot of sort of theories and ideas out there about what it is to be a man. And I think that, again, that's part of the conversation that at Mandad we're trying to open up. We've done in issue 10, we did a piece on masculinity, and in issue 12 we're going to follow that up with another piece discussing masculinity and what it is to be a man or manly, because I think
you're opening cans of worms here.
I am. There are many cans that need opening, for sure.
Yeah, because then that's immediately then asking questions of me of, my kids, they're all boys, 3 boys. I've got 8-year-old, almost 6 and almost 4.
Yeah.
What do I want them to grow up being in this changing world? It seems like there's been a shift in what's expected of men, of boys.
Yeah.
So how then do I impart that on them if I didn't live through that? And my God, you really are.
It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? And we're interested. I had a bit of a back and forth with somebody only a day or 2 ago about, we're expected to be strong and tough and man up and all this kind of stuff, yet we're expected to be in touch with our emotions. You know, we're expected to a large extent provide and you know, go out and work and all of these things, yet we're also expected to be caring and nurturing and all of that kind of stuff, but without talking about it too much.
Because you're a show off.
Yeah, or well, either a show off, either you're a show off, or you're weak because you're opening up. You know, you're showing your softer side. You know, how many dads have cried whilst watching their little one up on stage, you know, doing a performance, or they're in the Christmas play or whatever it might be, you know, and you see a little tear come down because they're bursting with pride, you know. I think those sorts of conversations are not being had. And it's really, really interesting for me, married to an American, to see the difference. We are all very much keep calm and carry on, as my wife would say, and stiff upper lip. And I think speaking to American dads, because we've got quite a split audience, actually, UK and US, which is interesting. But speaking to American dads, I feel like there's a much more open conversation actually being had. And I think there's so much more potential here in the UK to really start opening guys up and to let them know that it's okay to talk about these things, not just to be proud of their kids, but to open up about their emotions and how they're feeling, whether it's seeing their little one up on stage doing some ballet, or whether it's they've just been through a really traumatic birth and their head's a mess and they don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to think, they don't know how they should feel about the whole situation, and they're just trying to muddle through it as best they can.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think I tend to call these things the should gremlins. You know, oh yeah, Rob should be at school run, but he should be at work. He should be at home for bedtime, but he should be over there building the business. He should be feeding and providing for the family, but he should be tucking them into bed at night. It's like, and this is part of why the Dads in Business project started. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? How on earth are we supposed to spin these plates and hold on to who we are? You know, the Dads in Business, we break dad down. I keep pointing next, it's just off screen. We've got, or we think there's like 4 lives. There's the work or business life, there's the money life, there's the family life, and there's ourself. And self is the first thing that goes. We forget the sense of who we were or who we are. Definitely. Because we're trying to please everyone else and please everyone.
And I can completely get with that. I used to be very, very, very fit, super fit, and part of my background is fitness and leisure and personal training and stuff. So that was my life, and that was my lifestyle for a very, very, very long time until I had kids, and unfortunately things do start to fall by the wayside. And again, through Mandad, it's something that we've covered is self-care. And getting away is so important, getting away from your other half and the kids, and still doing something for you. You need that me time, whether it is going to the gym or going away for a weekend now and again, or I don't know, sitting upstairs for an hour with a book, whatever it might be. But we allow things to slip, because I'm still at that point, and I need to fix my personal health and fitness, but I'm constantly running around after everybody else. You know, I am putting hours and hours and hours into my business, and I'm also walking the dog twice a day, and I'm managing things around the house alongside my wife, and I'm trying to be a good dad, and I'm trying to be a good husband, and yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to juggle, and we do hobbies, activities, friendships. They all tend to slip for dads.
And I think that sort of self time needs to be given permission from our other halves as well. Yeah, it needs to be given without prejudice. Not you've been reading for an hour, you know, on the clock, because then you start to feel guilty about it, because then it becomes something you're not going to do next time. And it's heartening to see that the contributions from your dad's stories, part of your magazine, is flushing that out, because one of my biggest sort of barriers or beliefs was, it's just me. It can't be everyone that's feeling like this. But hopefully what you're finding out, as well as we are with the employers that we talk to, or the communities that we speak to, it's very common. But it's the unspoken stuff.
Yeah.
It's the man up, brush it under the carpet, just get on with it. And when you speak to Americans yourself, they are more open to it. I think they're more emotionally in tune.
Yeah.
But these perceptions and stigmas go from West Coast America right through to dads that we spoke to in Japan. They're all the same. And I think it's really good to see people like yourself pushing that conversation, because I don't think anything changes until we start talking about it. So I'm intrigued as to hear what's next for Mandad Media. How can we connect? How can our listeners, viewers connect with you and the magazine? Where can we see these stories? Tell us a bit about Mandad and what's next.
Okay, so at the moment we so the magazine goes out monthly, and you can find that on the website. So it's mandad.media, and all you need to do is register for an account. You can create a free account, which will give you access to the website. If you want to subscribe to the magazine, then it's £4.50 a month. And then you will also have access to offers and discounts and things like that as we grow that element of the business. So we're partnering with different brands and different companies to give our members more value. So Mandad Rewards will give people extra value on top of having access to the magazine every month. So we tend to run sort of 100 to 120 pages every month, and it is packed with really, really useful information, from how to deal with a toddler tantrum, to breastfeeding, to sex and relationships. We've got experts and professionals on the panel as well, including divorce coaches, a hypnotherapist, a real variety of people that we've got involved, and the types of topics that we cover. Mental health is a massive focus for us. Mental health and suicide prevention really does underpin everything that we do. And going back to when we created Mandad, our initial investor and one of our original directors, he was struggling with his own mental health at the time, and he decided to sell up his share. We found a buyer, and we brought somebody else in. And a couple of months after that, he took his own life. And he was a friend, he was a business colleague, and it came as a massive shock, because although we knew he was struggling, we didn't know how much, we didn't know what the actual issues were. And I'm not going to go into his personal details, because we have found out more since his death. But unfortunately, you never quite know. You never know what's going on behind closed doors, as it were. And we need to continue to open up these conversations. We need to make it okay for guys to speak about how they're feeling and to access support services and stuff. And so Martin's death has, I guess, in a way, reinforced our belief in Mandad, if that makes sense. It drives our purpose forward, because we know there's a massive issue with men's mental health. 75% of suicides are done by men, and it's part of our mission as well to help improve that, to help guys, to deal with any mental health issues that they might be experiencing. So through the website, what we're aiming to do is to, over time, we're going to redevelop the website. We're going to include signposting to support services, to more information about whether it's mental health, or whether it's you've got, a dad's meetup, in Leeds or Manchester or Cornwall or wherever it might be, and to and to start making more information available to men and to dads about what is out there. Because again, there is a lot of great stuff happening. There's a lot of good stuff happening out there for guys and for dads, but not everybody knows about it. So to piece it all together and to be able to create a space where you can come and not only connect with other dads, but to find out what is going on and what is available, then that's part of what we want to do. So it's a magazine, it's a community space. It's going to evolve even further as time goes on. We've got big plans about what we want to do and to offer other products and services. We've got some merch available as well. So if you want a Mandad hoodie or a t-shirt, then you can grab one of those up as well. We're across all of the social media channels. So, you know, just go and look up Mandad Media or Mandad Magazine and you will find us online.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, Lorde, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting to you. I think it's, you need to keep opening those cans of worms, because it's people like you that are, driving this conversation. And like you say, there's too much unspoken issues going around that can lead to the very worst things happening. And I think if we can keep not over gloss it, but create positivity around these conversations, I think it can only be for the better moving forward. And thank you again for joining us and taking time out of your day to speak with us about your experiences, sharing so openly and candidly. I'm sure that will connect to people, but also the mission of Mandad. So it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you very much for your time. Keep it up. I will drop all these links in the session as well, so people can connect with you. But until then, we'll keep on our good fight and keep it going. Lorde de Laurentiis. Did I get it right that time?
De Laurentiis, yeah, that's
De Laurentiis, there we go. Thank you very much, sir.
No worries,
have a lovely evening. Take care.
Thank you very much.